Hello again, and welcome back to Lost in Translation. My name is Nico, and this time we're taking a look at the Torah portion of Masei and the 10 things that you will miss if you are only reading the portion in English. So let's start with number 1. These are the journeys. Okay, this Torah portion now starts with a complete list of all the places that the children of Israel journeyed to and from during the 40 years, from exiting Egypt to their camp here just across the Jordan from Jericho. And what's interesting here is that we have 42 locations that are listed out. 42. Now, besides the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, 42 is a very important number in the Torah, and we understand that this number is a reference to the name of Hashem. That there's a 42-letter name. We also have reference to this in the creation narrative. We see this number come up a lot, and so why are there 42 locations? Why is it connected to Hashem this way? Well, for us to understand that this process of traversing the wilderness from the limitations of Mitzrayim, from the limitations of our egoism, to the land of Israel, to having all of our efforts focused straight to the Creator, that this process in itself is divine. It has 42 stations, as it were, because it's all part of the divine plan. That's why we have this connection to this divine number in the number of places that are, or the number of encampments that are enumerated here. Number 2, according to their journeys. Okay, we have another slight description in the translation here. Here in the Chabad version, we have their starting points. Here in the Art Scroll, I think they use the term goings forth, a little more archaic, but maybe a little bit more connected to the actual Hebrew, right? But what's interesting here is that this verse starts that Moshe recorded their starting points for their journeys, right? According to the word of Hashem, and these were their journeys with their starting points. According to their journeys, and these were their journeys according to their goings forth. Well, right, that this was all done by according to the word of Hashem. And we have this inversion to show us this inverse perception that we have from above downwards and from below upwards, right? That the way we perceive things in our life here is usually opposite from the perception of the divine planner, right? That that all the things that the children of Israel feel as hardships are actually preparations, are actually acts of mercy, right? That everything for Hashem is focused at the thought of creation, the end product, which is our corrected state, which from the perspective of the creator who stands outside of time, it's already accomplished. It's only we have this perception inside the construct of time, which is also part of creation. And this perspective inside of time, inside our egoism, gives us the opposite perspective of the one who's always giving to our state of constant receiving, right? And so these kind of juxtapositions of of the same phrase inverted give us a clue of this oppositeness in perspective. And if we can understand that there is an opposite perspective, we can try to imagine that opposite from understanding our own perspective. I know that I see things this way in, you know, in a particular way. I can imagine how to see it in its opposite. And when I do that, I can start to imagine what the real purpose the creator has when I am when we are going through some sort of event or when something has happened in our lives. Number 3, you shall drive out the inhabitants. Okay, so we've got this long list of 42 camps, and we know that they are now on the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, and now they're being told, right? Um, okay, again, Hashem is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they're being told that when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you will drive out the inhabitants, destroy the temples, destroy their idols, demolish their high places. So, you know, again, what's happening here? Are we talking about the conquest of a people and the destruction of physical places? Or are we coming to understand that even within this desire of being connected to Hashem, this Yashar Kel, this land that's going to be occupied, that once we are in spirituality, the egoism is still there. And in that place, it has to be completely destroyed. So all of the temples, all of the idols, anything that we encounter in spirituality that might cause us to think that there is anything other than the absolute unique oneness of the Creator, anything that might cause us to think that there's some other authority in the universe, that needs to be eliminated. Otherwise, we won't stay there. We won't stay in this state of Israel, right? Not talking about physical places, but talking about spiritual states. We can't be connected to the Creator and imagine that there's any other forces in the universe besides Him, right? So they're being told that these inhabitants, these other forces that we meet inside spirituality, have to be eliminated because they don't belong to spirituality. They belong to our egoism, and we have to continue to eliminate that from our spiritual efforts. Number 4, the borders of Eretz Israel. Okay, so we know that the land has to get cleared out, and now we're going to clearly define the borders. And why is the Torah telling us this? Because there are commandments that are obligatory within the land of Israel, but are not obligatory outside of the land of Israel. Okay, so a clear border is being established so that we know how to behave in one place and how to behave in another place. Well, again, if we take a look at this from a spiritual perspective, we can understand that, there are certain things that are not going to be expected of us until we have come to this spiritual state of Israel, right? That certain ways of treating our agricultural produce, for example, certain levels of charity that are absolutely required within the state of Israel, but are not required outside of the state of Israel. Maybe they're even impossible for us to commit these levels of charity until we have arrived at this state of Israel. So again, thinking about terms of spirituality, right? Why do we have this difference? Is it because it's too difficult to perform these mitzvot outside of the land of Israel? Or maybe it's just not possible because once you're performing that level of charity, once you're performing in this way, you are in the state of Israel from a spiritual perspective. So it's not that we are unable to perform these commandments outside of the borders of Israel. It's just that once you're observing these commandments, it's because you are in the borders of Israel from the spiritual perspective. Number 5, cities for the Levites. Okay, so now the the land of Israel has been divided amongst the tribes, and we're being told that the children of Israel shall give the Levites uh, from their possessions cities in which they will dwell, right? And these cities are supposed to be fortified cities with agricultural land around them. So again, they've received a heritage, they have a part of spirituality, and they're supposed to give something up of that to the Levites who have no heritage. Their heritage is Hashem, right? So again, if we start to think about spirituality and how spirituality requires us to be connected to Hashem, and to be connected to Hashem, we have to be connected to each other, right? That each one of us has a responsibility for the other in our advancement into spirituality. Um, and that our intention for dwelling in the land, as it were, should be for the benefit of the Creator. The way that we accomplish this is by giving up from what we enjoy in that state something to others, right? That we support the Levites who support us in their service to Hashem. That that any one person only acquires a portion of the land. And he's completely reliant upon the rest of the nation for them to take care of their portion of the land. And so we see this idea of heritage and this apportioning to the tribes and the individuals. We see this interconnected reliance that all of us have together because one person is an ego, only receives, but together now we have an environment where bestowal can happen in this mutual reciprocal fashion and can become a culture of bestowal where commandments like leaving crops for the poor to harvest on their own, uh, giving tithes to temple service, um, supporting a whole tribe by giving cities and lands of our heritage to them, even though they've not been given a heritage. There is this system of mutual guarantee, what's called arvut in Hebrew, that's being established in these early phases of social order in the nation of Israel taking its place in the land. Okay, and that's what we see here with these cities being given from our heritage to those who don't have any heritage in the land, because their heritage is Hashem himself. Number 6, cities of refuge. Okay, so among these cities that you give to the Levites, there should be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall provide places for a murderer to flee. When you say murderer here, and there's 4 in halakhically, there's 4 types of murder. Um, Completely unintentional. It was a complete accident. Number 2, it was unintentional, but it was through an act of carelessness. So there is some culpability, but it wasn't an intentional murder. Um, Maybe something else. Number 3, where, again, it wasn't intended, but the negligence was extreme to where, you could pretty much know somebody's going to die if you behave in this way, but you didn't have a specific victim in mind. And number 4 is somebody who is warned, don't do that. You're going to kill that person. It's a capital offense. You'll be put to death. And he kills anyway. Right? Okay, that's an absolute murderer. Only the court can decide what kind of incident this is. And in these incidences, um, the murderer, who is now also subject to vengeance by the victim's close family, can flee to a city of refuge. Right? We have this mercy being afforded even to those who are connected to, the one of the worst sins that we can commit to cause the death of another. Now again, in spirituality, maybe we're, death is something different from what we think of on a day-to-day basis. But here it's just interesting that, you know, that in addition to these cities of refuge, which you benefit from, there are 42 other cities that we give to the Levites. That's just for them. Huh? The 6 cities that we benefit from because we don't know, maybe some strange circumstance will cause me to need a place to run to. And I will run to this city of refuge and I will be safe there. So I can benefit from the mercy of this, me providing this city to the Levites, helps me. But these 42 others, they don't help me at all. They're just part of this act of bestowal back to somebody else. And it's 42 cities, just like the 42 camps, connects us back to the mystery of the name of Hashem, right? So when we give these cities to the Levites, we are acting, we are behaving in the same way that Hashem constantly behaves to us. We give them everything that they need, not because we want anything back, but because giving is what we want to do. Number 7, resident among you. Okay, resident among them, excuse me. Um, that basically we're understanding here that that we're not talking about a closed society, right? That spirituality is not only for those Jews who keep all of the commandments, right? That that here we have also room for a proselyte, somebody who is looking to join the community, who is entering the land, as it were, someone who is learning and wants to become connected to the land of Israel, whether this is an actual convert who is not Jewish, who wants to join the corporeal Jewish community, or if we're talking about this spiritual state of proselytes, somebody who is coming into Israel from the outside. And we also have this idea of the resident among them, that there must be this class of people who are allowed to be, who are in the state of Israel without being really a member of the nation of Israel or the children of Israel, right? That there is some sort of spiritual validity for those who are also connected to Hashem through some other form of connection. We understand eventually that through the Torah that these people, practically speaking, are those who have accepted the uh, the seven commandments of Noah. Okay, so these are the basic commandments that all human beings at all times should abide by if they're going to be in a state of spirituality. And so there is afforded, the Torah tells us that there is this way of being connected to spirituality, even though we aren't Jewish or not members of the children of Israel. So if that's the case, we have to understand that there is a valid connection outside of this specific method, and that we have to allow them their part of spirituality. We have to acknowledge it and accept it as part of creation. Number 8, testimony of witnesses. Okay, so right here, talking about capital cases, but really any kind of incidents of justice where the court is going to be concerned, right? That we need multiple witnesses, right? That we aren't going to enact judgment upon somebody on the testimony of a single witness. It's forbidden. Now, again, um, if we're understanding this through a spiritual scope, through an idea of how does this work in spirituality, we have established this interconnectivity, this need uh, of mutual guarantee, and that when we have a single person involved, that's where the ego is involved. I, I alone, right? So a single witness here is describing an egotistical desire. So if the ego is desiring justice, it's not valid. But if we have a collection of witnesses, at least two, who are mutually guaranteeing each other, now that we have this community, there's the possibility that justice is being sought for something other than egotistical gain. No, in the practical sense, it means that, if we understand more about these witnesses in Torah, later in Talmud, we understand that these witnesses must be scholars. In capital offenses, they have to call out to the perpetrator and say, don't commit this action. It's a capital offense. You will die. The perpetrator has to say, I don't care, and commit the act anyway. So the idea of somebody being convicted of a capital crime under this level of this kind of strict observance of process is really unlikely. We see how merciful the justice system is actually meant to be, and that in the end, the courts would always err on the side of mercy, knowing that the Creator will take care of everything. And only in the event where no choice but to convict somebody is placed before the court, well, now the court must act for the benefit of the community, right? Not on a single witness, not just one person alone, not an egotistical desire for justice, but justice should always be sought for the benefit of the whole. Number 9, Zillah. Okay, remember a couple portions ago, there's this man named Zillah whose daughters come to Moshe Rabbeinu before the tent of meeting and say, listen, our father died without any sons. We should get a portion of that heritage. And the Torah shows us how when somebody dies without sons, that the inheritance is given to the daughters, and that daughters should inherit from their fathers in this way. Again, here we have this coming back where the rest of the tribe comes to Moshe Rabbeinu about this situation, say, hey, listen, if these daughters of Zelophehad marry outside of our tribe, then that portion of our tribe's inheritance will go to that other tribe, right? And we will lose part of our heritage. And now, to resolve this, we're being told that these 5 daughters must marry within their tribe in order to keep the heritage complete in that tribe. Okay, so again, if we look at this through the spiritual lens, we have a father. A father is the male aspect, bestowal, and he dies. He's so that father is that aspect of bestowal is no longer needed, and the only thing remaining from it is his daughters, these vessels of reception. Well, those vessels of reception still need to be managed by some sort of bestowal. And what's being described here is that the pairing of bestowal and reception is specific within this system of tribes, right? We know that each tribe has its own quality, its own spiritual quality. So, in order to maintain that system of heritage and that system of bestowal and reception, those vessels of reception have to come under the management of new vessels of bestowal. And to make sure that balance and mutual guarantee are kept, then those vessels of bestowal need to be as similar to their father as possible, which means that they have to be in the same tribe in order to maintain this level of heritage. Now, if it's not connected to the heritage, if the daughters have not inherited, now they are free to marry anywhere in the in the uh, in the nation of Israel. And number 10, through Moshe. Okay, at the very end, these are the commandments and ordinances that the Lord commanded to the children of Israel through Moses, right? HaMishpatim asher tziva Hashem biyad Moshe, by his hand, biyad Moshe, el bnei Israel, right? Ba'avot Moab, el Yarden, Yerecho, right? So through Mosei or by his hand, right? That this is interesting because it's different than the language used at the end of the book of Leviticus, where all the commandments are given as well. But here we're being shown that there's this new relationship between Israel and the commandments. That it's not just that it's not just a commandment from Hashem to Moshe, and that Moshe is now telling the nation about it. But now that the nation has come to the point where it can understand that these commandments are coming from Hashem through Moshe, and they understand this relationship of Hashem and Moshe. Right? We've talked about how Moshe is Hashem spelled backwards, right? That at this point, right as they're about to enter Israel, the land of Israel, that the nation of Israel understands this relationship now. They've been corrected to this point, and they are ready to receive the land. Whereas before, maybe it wasn't very clear to them, right? That this relationship wasn't so clear and they weren't ready. And that's why they had to go through 40 years of correction. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and interesting for you. Please share any thoughts that you might have. I invite you to like, share, comment, subscribe. And until next time, be well.